Oil is in Florida. Did you know that? And for interest in Jamaica, the geology of Florida gives some promising insight. So with this video, what it is that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be giving a brief historical background of Florida's oil exploration, production, and then as well tying it into the prospect of Jamaica's oil exploration endeavors. So if you had seen the video I had made as regards to the similarity between Florida and Jamaica's limestone, then that will lay the foundation for this video. So see this video as part 2. Now in the context of limestone can be considered as a reservoir rock. And in the context of oil exploration production, reservoir rock, source rock, and cap rock are three key terms. Now, another thing that has to be taken into consideration is the fact that there must be the fault in place to seal it, as well as heat to basically make the oil. The nature of the environment can make the oil become too heated and becomes gas. And if it's a case where there are too many fracture zones, then that same hydrocarbon can escape in a seep. Now, without going too deep into that technical side, what it is I want you to just grasp is that limestone rock can be considered as a reservoir. However, it can also be considered as a cap. As you can see in this clip, there is that layer, that crystal layer of calcite. This calcite is basically impermeable. And this is just giving insight into the reality that not all limestone can be reservoir. There can be zones within the limestone that form or function as a cap or a seal. In addition to that, the tectonic environment, or whether or not there is a fault in place to assist with trapping and or promoting the escape, is also important. So as you can see, this fault here represents what potentially could be an escape. This is just giving you insight into the complexity of ensuring that oil can be produced and or tapped into. Now with this image, what it is I highlight is an anticline, and that basically gives reference into the environment in which the oil can be tapped on the ground. This image, you can see anticline and syncline, and these basically explain folding, and folding basically is linked to the nearby, or rather how far or near a tectonic or earthquake / active fault is located. Now where I go now is into some of the history as regards to Florida oil reserve and production. So according to Google AI, Florida does indeed have oil reserves and has produced crude oil since the 1940s, primarily in the Southwest / Sunnyland Trend and the Panhandle J Field. Though it's a very minor contributor, less than 0.1% to US production, with current drilling often occurring in sensitive areas like the Everglades. Now, while oil exists on the public lands like Big Cypress, extraction faces environmental concerns due to potential spills and impact on ecosystems, even with existing production wells. So in essence, there exists the South Florida Basin, the Panhandle Basin, and where these two basins are concerned, active and past drilling highlights over 1,100 wells, which have been drilled in Florida, with some still active mostly in these regions. Now, I know you may be looking at this now and saying, 1,100 wells, that's very insignificant. But if you take a look into what is the potential as regards to for Jamaica, based on the geologic context of Florida, there does hold some significant, I would say, gains that we can get from this. So just looking at geographically speaking, the Panhandle uh, section is more so to the northwest of Florida based on this map. And where then now I take you is into a potential cross section or an actual cross section provided by this source. This cross section, we can see that we have the limestone layer overlain by clay, which is more than likely supposed to be a layer that is not as permeable, although it may be highly porous. Um, but this image highlights more so for the aquifer. Now, the reason why this image still is relevant is that it gives some insight into where potentially the oil could actually be. I didn't mention, but I should mention that as per Google AI, drilling would have taken place in depths of 11,000 feet. So that basically is indicating that this more than likely is going close to where there is the uh, intersection or the interaction of the carbonate and the non-carbonate potentially metamorphic slash igneous layers underneath it. This clip highlights where the Sunnyland oil field is located. As per Google AI, production slash exploration would have occurred from here to Miami. And in terms of a total distance, that's approximately 100 kilometers. Now, using these Google Map images as a reference, what you see here is actual proof of an oil pumping apparatus. And as per this image as well, the Sunnyland oil field was the first commercial oil well in Florida, and it was the only oil producing location in Florida up to the 1960s. Now, you may be wondering why it's a case that Florida doesn't go further into potentially expanding its oil production. And a key factor is more than likely due to its environmental laws, as well as the reality that Florida is somewhat, I would say, in a delicate status as regards to its freshwater access and the potential of its freshwater being contaminated, um, and that contamination being somewhat a major factor as regards to uh, managing containment and limiting the kind of environmental impact that can occur to the wildlife, as well as potentially the impact that can occur to agriculture, and the mere fact that the population itself can also be impacted with the aquifer system being somewhat impeded and polluted by oil potentially that can have an oil spill or through an oil spill. Now, in turning my attention to Jamaica, interest in Jamaica should now see that there does hold significant potential or validation in the potential of Jamaica's oil reserves or slash oil exploration endeavors. As per Google AI, the areas of significant potential slash interest are the Walton Basin and Morant Basin. What you should know generally is that when you hear the word basin, it gives indication of a potential source in terms of hydrocarbon field. And if you look at this Google satellite image, those two areas more so like to the southwest of Jamaica, those raised platforms, relatively flat, somewhat reflects the raised carbonate platform in the Florida or for the Florida Peninsula. And it's basically composed of carbonate, and underneath it potentially could be key traps. What we should bear in mind, however, is that, as mentioned in previous video, Jamaica's seismic status is much more active than that of Florida. Florida is considered to be in a passive tectonic margin relative to Jamaica. And as I've highlighted earlier in this video, earthquakes or faults, while they can act as very good seal points, are also the proponents, if you will, for escape. So seepage is highly likely, and we have examples of hydrocarbon seeps on the mainland of Jamaica, be it I believe it's the Windsor spring area, the firewater. So using that as, proof, it's basically highlighting that it is likely that there are seeps. And basically, in terms of the pumping potential, all of this exploration in Jamaica's waters, that is highly focused on those zones that are less risky, yet have high potential to yield great returns. So this is just giving you an overview as to what really is the geologic setting that basically gives indication, using Florida as reference, into Jamaica's potential for actually having significant hydrocarbon reserves in its offshore waters.